Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to class. Today we are going to finish up our chapter talking about post-classical Asia. When we get into the Ming Dynasty, okay. Now, of course, when it comes to the Ming Dynasty, they will be a direct response to what we talked about yesterday. When we kind of ended with our discussion yesterday by talking about the Yuan Dynasty. Okay. Now, with that being said, let's kind of jump into our review from yesterday before we kind of get too much into it to make sure we have our questions correct and everything ready to go. So let me, hold on one second, guys. Okay, let's see here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, from yesterday's discussion, we talked about the Mongol Empire, and we talked about the Yuan Dynasty. Now, of course, before we get too much into the Yuan and kind of how it resulted in what we're going to be talking about today, we'll start off here with who was Genghis Khan. Okay, of course, talking about the Mongols, we've heard about the Mongols quite a bit. We have, of course, saw them several times and talked about them on Crash Course World History. We've kind of hinted at them a few times throughout the course of the year, but of course, we really hit them up yesterday. So when it comes to Genghis Khan, can anybody tell me who he was? Anybody? Okay, Sahara? Okay, very good. He became the main leader, or probably the most famous of all the Mongols. And yes, he came in and kind of united all their tribes into one. Okay, now, of course, when it came to Mongol culture, we were going to see they are going to be, like they always say in Crash Course History, they are going to be the exception, because as we saw from like ancient history, those cultures that were that had permanent residence, those cultures that adopted agriculture, those are the ones that are really going to thrive, and those are the ones going to become these big major civilizations. Well, the Mongols are going to stay nomads. They're going to travel from place to place and raid areas and this and that. And of course, when we talk about the Mongol Empire and how large it wasn't like they ruled the whole area with an iron fist. That was kind of like their gang turf. They kind of roamed from one area to the next and just kind of went all through that territory. But of course, they used fear as a weapon, and people knew not to defy the Mongols because they were pretty heavy hitters. Now, when it comes to the Mongol army, and really just the Mongols in general, what made them different? Okay, what were some things that made them different than other armies or made them different than other people? Give me one thing. Yes. Okay, they were expert cavalrymen. Okay, so they were great fighters from horseback. In fact, kind of the equivalent of when we talk about like the samurai and the Spartans from feet, the Mongols were probably that on horseback. And just know that their whole horse culture was so ingrained and so strong that a lot of these Mongols, the old story was a lot of Mongols learned how to ride a horse before they even learned how to walk. Okay, so that horse culture was extremely strong in the Mongol Empire. Okay, what's another thing about them that was different? Or maybe innovations or things that they did that made them different than other armies? Yes. Please say louder. Okay, they were nomadic, and we kind of mentioned that. Yeah, they were and the fact that they were able to dominate a region and be nomadic is very, very different than anybody else. Okay, give me one more. Anybody give me one more thing about the Mongols that made them different? Yes. Okay, they weren't super large. Okay, we said they probably at the most totaled about 200,000, but generally their army over the entire area of Eurasia probably was in the neighborhood of probably like 80 to about 130. Okay, so it wasn't just a massive, overwhelming army. And understand, when you talk about a land that huge, you're really going to be talking about armies like in the millions that would be able to control that area, and they were like a fraction of that. You raise your hand and give me one more little fact about the Mongols. Okay, they were great archers from horseback. Of course, we also talked about that compound bow. We talked about the use of the stirrups to kind of anchor themselves into their saddles and allowed them to kind of lean and guide a horse just by kind of their hip movement rather than having to use their hands. Yes. Yes, and we talked about the technique of it. We talked about that feigned retreat tactic where they had kind of would draw armies in and surround them and things like that. So again, all these things pretty indicative of the Mongol army. So of course we talked about them. Of course, the Mongols, And this kind of leads into our next discussion. But of course, with the death of Genghis Khan, of course, Genghis Khan also, one big fact about the Mongols and Genghis Khan was that, yes, he had lots and lots and lots of kids. And of course, when we talk about lots, we're not talking about like 8, 9, 10 kids. We're talking like hundreds. I mean, some people say that anywhere from like 200 to 300 up to like almost like 1,000 kids is what's estimated, that he had all these children because he wanted to make his lineage kind of go out throughout the world. Okay. So a lot of times we'll talk about, yeah, such and such was a descendant of Genghis Khan. We'll understand you're also talking about a pretty huge window of people that would be considered to be this descendant of Genghis Khan. But we see that, yes, this area is going to be kind of broken up amongst some of these descendants. Okay, now the real one that we want to talk about that kind of went into the second half of our discussion was the one that pushed down and actually took over China. Okay, and that one that pushes down into China, they are going to become known as the Yuan Dynasty. Now, the very first one right here, very simple. When it comes to the Yuan Dynasty, what made them different than other dynasties? You remember that one? What was different about the Yuan Dynasty than other Chinese dynasties that had ruled in the past? Yeah. Okay, they were the very first group of invaders, of outsiders to come in and basically rule China. It was like unheard of for something like this to happen. I mean, understand, throughout history, China had been such a strong culture, again, they forever, of course, they always had this air of superiority about them, that they were better than people and they were the center of the earth. And then now they're getting taken over by an outside group, the Mongols. And of course, that is like, again, very, very unheard of. Now, the thing about the Yuan Dynasty, and we'll get into the part on the bottom in a second, but just remember about the Yuan. Of course, they take over a giant swath of land because it's all this territory that was considered to be China. Okay, so they really have the largest dynasty of China at this time. Now, they will be headed up by one of Genghis Khan's grandsons. His name is Kublai Khan. And of course, Kublai Khan, when he comes in, he is going to make basically his dynasty, or basically saying that in his dynasty, if you are of Mongolian descent, you are the elites in society. Basically, you are the ones that can run the government. You are the ones that will be the emperor eventually. You will be the ones that will be the nobles. You're the ones in charge. And that the Chinese people are all second-class citizens. Well, you're literally talking about 99 to 98% of your population that you're now saying are second-class citizens compared to the Mongols up on top. Obviously, this is not going to be handled very well. And we'll see that the Yuan Dynasty, even though it's going to have kind of this look of stability, is going to be extremely unpopular. And of course, that's going to lead into today's discussion about the Ming and when they do take over. But understand, they didn't like this foreign rule. The Chinese were not having that. So we're going to see that the Yuan Dynasty will be one that's going to constantly be having to deal with uprisings and fights and rebellions and things like that. Okay, but again, we'll get into that in just a little bit. But one major thing that happened during the Yuan Dynasty is going to be this right here. Now, the question you had was, what was significant about this meeting between Kublai Khan and Marco Polo? Can anybody remember why that was significant? What was important about that? And give me somebody that I appreciate it. It's awesome. Give me somebody else that hadn't responded yet. That can remember what was significant about this meeting between Kublai Khan and Marco Polo. Anybody? Yes, sir. Okay, so let's remember, and again, just to kind of build on what was said, let's remember Marco Polo. We had talked about him before. Okay, we talked about him being this explorer, this guy that kind of went on this journey with his kind of merchant trip with his uncles and brothers and father and stuff like that. And of course, he was known for keeping this diary and journaling down in detail everything he saw on this journey, whether it be what life was like here in the Middle East or out here into these various other empires, Ottoman, Mughal, Safavid, all of that stuff, through India, up to the mountains and out to China. He cataloged everything, wrote everything down in very vast detail. And again, we might think, well, what's the big deal? Well, understand, there was nothing like this at this time. There was no journaling. There was no real little window into what a culture was like in India or China or the Middle East or any of that stuff. You can hear stories, but again, this is before the age of the internet where I could just pull up a picture in 5 seconds, or I can open up a YouTube video and watch about what life's like in China. That wasn't the case. And so when Marco Polo returns, yes, he takes all these details he gets from Kublai Khan. Because trust me, Kublai Khan was just as interested in Europe as Marco Polo was interested in China. So Kublai Khan wanted to know all the stuff about Europe, about Italy, about the whole thing. Anyway, he's going to print this book. And yes, like was said, when this book gets distributed and it goes out, it is going to spark this age of exploration, because now all these other explorers will be inspired by what Marco Polo has said, and they want to get out and they want to see what's out there and they want to explore the world. So, you know, the Columbuses and Magellans and so forth, all the other explorers we talked about will be directly influenced by this meeting in this book by Marco Polo. Now, moving on to today, we are going to talk about the Ming Dynasty, and we're going to kind of do our normal deal. So, of course, when it comes to this dynasty, we're going to look at cultural achievements. So we're going to name 3 cultural achievements of the Ming. Of course, there's going to be lots of achievements, more than that, but I just want you to be able to list 3 of those. And like I said, today's lesson probably will not be as long as others. So this is going to be pretty much it. This question, those answers will be what you pick up. Yes, sir. Okay, so anyway, so we'll look at the 3 cultural achievements of the Ming. I'm going to let y'all write that down, and I am going to get our attendance real quick. One moment, guys. Okay. All right. So the Ming. Okay. So of course, like we just mentioned, the Yuan dynasty. This dynasty was controlled by the Mongols. This outside invaders. They were in a very unpopular dynasty. Okay. People did not like them. So of course, like I said, there's rebellions, uprisings, and a lot. So what's going to happen with the Ming is that we will see that that it's going to basically start as a peasant uprising. Okay, peasants are going to rise up against the Mongols, the Yuan, and they are going to end up getting so much steam and so much momentum behind them that yes, they will rise up and finally kick out these Mongols. And please understand, even as powerful as the Mongols were and fearsome fighters and all that stuff, you simply cannot stop this massive wave of people, the Chinese. I mean, once you get these Chinese people kind of going in the same direction, I mean, you might as well stand at the beach and try to stop a wave from coming in. I mean, it's not going to happen. So yes, these Mongols do get kicked out. Now, on a side note that we'll talk about a little bit more in the next couple chapters, we will also see that, yes, after the death of Genghis Khan, we will see that Mongol Empire is going to start to collapse, okay? First of all, the Mongol Empire was way too big. And of course, they did not have an army that could control it all. So, like into the next chapter, when we start talking about the formation of Russia, understand, when Russia basically goes, hey, look, we're going to rule ourselves and we don't want to be ruled by you Mongols. And if y'all want to do something about it, bring it. Well, of course, the Mongols have no ability to go stop the Russians, just like they don't have the ability to stop the Chinese here. So we see that Mongol Empire starts to crumble very quickly, okay? And of course, we also see this advance in innovation, okay, where the Mongols, they had the stirrups and the bows and arrows and things like that. Well, now we start seeing things like rifles and guns and cannons and gunpowder used in war. And it doesn't matter how good of a shot you are with a bow and arrow. I could take you out with a rifle. It now makes me at a distinct advantage. Okay, so those are going to be some big reasons why yes, this Mongol Empire does fall. Okay, but as you see here, of course, when the Ming do take over, they are not going to be able to control land nearly as big as what the Yuan dynasty had. But what we'll see is that they will actually push on a little bit further than what you see here. So we will see that under the Ming, they will push into Korea. They will even push further south into Southeast Asia, places like present-day Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, places like that. Okay. Now, facts about them. This guy right here. Okay, now he's going to be known as Hong Wu. Okay, and again, I'm going to do my best to say that name, Emperor Su Yan Zhang. Okay, or we can just call him Emperor Hong Wu. He is going to be this peasant. He is going to be this common everyday guy that leads the uprising. Okay, that leads the fight against the Yuan. And of course, when they push out the Yuan and the Mongols, they name him emperor. So it's kind of this cool story of just this peasant man who becomes the emperor of China. Okay. Now, of course, the Ming Dynasty began with the overthrow of the Mongols in China. Okay, so they kick out the Yuan, and of course, a peasant son, Hong Wu, commanded the rebel army that drove the Mongols out of China, and of course, he will become the new emperor. Okay, so again, kind of unheard of in China at this time. Not royal blood, not noble birth, peasant, everyday man, but he is going to lead this uprising and become the leader. Now, some other facts about the Ming Dynasty. We'll see here that, of course, there's kind of shows Hong Wu right there. Of course, they'll kind of refer to this as the last native imperial dynasty. Okay, because after the Ming do go away in 1644, we will see other dynasties come in, like the Qin Dynasty and so forth, and they will be quite different. Okay, and again, it'll be more modernized. Okay, but again, that will be later on. Now, of course, we talked about the rebellion. We talked about now, of course, we'll get into a lot of this stuff. It's more like some kind of hit notes of what we're going to be getting into. But talking about naval expeditions, we'll get into that in just a second. They will build this capital at Nanjing, which is going to be there in Beijing. We'll talk about the Forbidden City. Of course, the porcelain, the Ming porcelain. You might have heard of people talk about, oh, that's a Ming vase. Okay, like a vase, like they're very, very highly well made and very highly valued. Well, of course, this porcelain making during the Ming Dynasty will be kind of first rate. Of course, literature and philosophy. Of course, we'll talk about the Forbidden City in just a little bit. And of course, they will make major changes in their agriculture, which is going to allow them to produce more food. And of course, when you can produce more food, you can feed more people. And when you can feed more people, people live longer, healthier lives, and they create and produce more people. And so, of course, that large population of China is going to continue to grow and get even bigger during this time. Okay, so again, just some quick facts there about the Ming Dynasty that go along with that last page, and then we're going to kind of move forward with our discussions. Now, of course, things are going pretty good for the Ming Dynasty. Okay, of course, they kick out the Mongols. They start all this innovation. They start building these cities. They start looking to expand. And what we see is that under this emperor, and you can see there his name is going to be Yongglo. Okay, Yongglo is going to commission the construction of a palace. Okay, now this is going to be the imperial palace of obviously the emperor. Okay, this is going to be an area that's going to become known as the Forbidden City. Oh, wait, no, Dakota. Oh, you're not. Dakota? Are you? Okay. Anyway, sorry. Okay. All right. So anyway, moving forward. Okay. Anyway, they'll begin the construction of this imperial city. Now, what this is going to be is obviously the palace of the emperors. But what's going to, and we'll look at this a little more in detail in a second. You can kind of see how large this is. But what's going to happen is this will become the palace, obviously, of the emperors, and they're going to call it the Forbidden City because nobody else is allowed to step foot in the city except for the emperor, the emperor's families, and maybe a couple nobles that are invited in by the emperor. The outside people, people from outside of China, even people that just lived in the main city, were not allowed to step foot in this location. Now, they tried to start saying, and they tried to kind of start claiming that this little square right here, this little building, this little house was like heaven on earth, okay? That it was the place of heaven and that normal mortal people had no right to step foot in there. Now, of course, this is a modernized picture of what the imperial city or what the Forbidden City looked like, okay? But again, all the surrounding people, they were just kind of these peasants. They were just kind of these regular everyday people. And here in the city, again, was seen as kind of being heaven. Now, this imperial city, this forbidden city, is going to be extremely expensive to construct. Okay, it is. I mean, it's gonna cause a ton of money, a ton of labor to get this thing going. But again, it's going to be kind of the house. It's going to be the home of the emperor for many years to come. In fact, there will be some situations where a lot of emperors will get to the point where they don't even leave the imperial city. They just kind of rule from there, and they kind of let things be known from this location, because they felt that, again, a lot of these emperors kind of get these big heads where they say that I'm this high and mighty and almost godlike figure, and that I won't even step foot out of heaven. So a lot of them pretty much are born and live their entire lives just inside that city. Now, to get a better view of the city, again, you can kind of see down here, of course, the winding rivers, the moat that goes around the entire thing, very ornate. As you can see, all these posts, and of course the wide swoops. The stoops there on the ledges. Statues. I mean, again, very, very ornate, very beautiful when it comes to the city. Now, go back to that in a second. Now, of course, as time went on, they did change the rules. I mean, now today, the Forbidden City is like a tourist destination. So, I mean, people from all over the world can go to the Forbidden City now. There was a big issue, between us and China. Of course, we'll talk about this stuff later on, when China became a communist country, and we kind of negotiated trade between us and China. And back in the 1960s, when our president, Richard Nixon, went and visited the Forbidden City. He was the very first American president to ever journey to the Forbidden City. And of course, a couple hundred years before that, it would have been completely unheard of that something like that happened. But of course, nowadays, it's more of a tourist destination than anything. Now, the other big thing that's going to happen during the Ming Dynasty, and this will be kind of the last thing we're going to hit up today, is going to be about the voyage of this guy right here. Okay. Now, this guy's name is going to be Hangzhi. Now, the thing about him is that during the Ming Dynasty, of course, they wanted to show their grandeur. They wanted to show their power. So what's going to happen is they're going to commission this guy right here. He is an explorer, okay? And they want him to go out and see the world and find what else is out there. Now, let's remember, this is also during this time of the age of exploration over in Europe. We have all the voyages of all these other explorers. Well, this guy right here, he is going to be right at that same level as a Columbus and a Magellan and things like that. Now, when Hangzhi goes on his journeys, okay, now what's going to be different about his journeys is that he is going to be fully funded by the Ming Dynasty. So when they go out and they're going to really kind of show this power and show this grandeur, they started constructing these ships called junk ships. So they called them junkers, okay? So it was a Chinese junk ship or Chinese junkers. And of course, you can see an example of one of these junk ships in the back. You can see the sails are going to be a little bit different. The hull is going to be a little bit different. But what you really can't see from this picture, they'll be able to see on the next one, is that these junk ships were gigantic. They were huge ships that they constructed. So kind of seeing right here, you can see the difference between Zhang He's treasure ship or his junk ship compared to the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria that Columbus sailed across the Atlantic. Okay, you can see it dwarfs it. I mean, you could probably put this. I mean, kind of seeing that like can be like one Santa Maria. You could probably put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8 Santa Marias inside of one of these junk ships. Okay, how big it was, just massive, almost like a cruise ship, I guess. Now, when these Chinese junk ships would come sailing into port, I mean, trust me, they got your attention. I mean, you kind of saw this, and of course, you see this giant ship. It gives off this impression of, again, of power, of wealth, of grandeur, of all this esteem. When a lot of your ships that are sailing around the ocean are these little small ships that we see from Europe. Okay, now the thing about Zhang He's treasure ships and his voyages is that yes, he will sail out to various places in Asia, like into India, into the Middle East. They'll even sail out and start kind of exploring around the coast of Africa. But at some point during the course of all this exploration, now a lot of times, people are like, well, why didn't he sail off? And you can kind of see the expeditions there about Zhang He. But, his expeditions could have gone out to the South Pacific or could have gone across the Pacific Ocean even. But as he does this expansion, as they do this exploration, and China starts talking about putting out colonies and starts expanding their lands. Something happens within the Ming Dynasty, okay, where basically these advisors that are around the emperor said, well, you know what? Our empire is already perfect as it is. We don't need to expand out. We don't need to take in other people's problems. We are already perfect. That's pretty much what they were saying. So at some point, we see here that they'll finally just kind of call him back. They'll call him back to port. They'll come back to China, and China kind of ends its expeditions, okay, where the rest of Europe is really kind of ramping up these expeditions, especially to North and South America. The Chinese pull their expeditions back and stop all this expansion that they started, okay? So, of course, you can kind of see here, you can see that his voyages demonstrated both the advanced development of Chinese shipbuilding and navigation techniques and the general exuberance of the early Ming period by, again, showing off these giant junk ships, okay? This era of exploration and expansionism slowed with the death of Yongmo, the emperor, because that next emperor comes along and they pretty much say, yeah, we're done with this expansion. We're done with exploration. Everybody come back, okay? Now, let's see, okay, yeah. All right, that's where we're going to hold off for today. All right, that kind of ends the chapter. So right now, let's make sure that our questions are done. You should have put 3 cultural advancements of the Ming Dynasty. Let's put a summary on the bottom. And when you're doing that, we're going to watch a quick video that talks about the Forbidden City. And you'll kind of see it in the video. You'll kind of talk about the history of it. It's about a 5-minute video, not very long. I do want your attention on that. Now, at the same time, let's make sure that we go back. All the questions that we have for this chapter are finished, are written in. Summaries are done on the bottom. If you missed a day or don't have something, guys, every video lesson is posted on Google Classroom. You can go back, you can look over them, and go from there. Okay, so and answer your question there. So there should be zero excuse to not have this tomorrow. Okay, so let's stop our recording and move.